Course tours are presented at the Moodle Exchange Conference to share well-organized courses with interesting designs. In this tour, Stacy Supak presents her Introduction to Geographic Information Systems course, showing Moodle's activity completion and restricted access features, as well as creative uses of Google Sheets and discussion forums.
I had 5 things when I was asked to come up with what are the things that you think you do that might be things people would want to adopt. And so I gave that idea some thought and I broke it down into 5 things. The first of that was I use activity completion and restricted access, which a lot of people already are using, to help students go through the course. Unlike Ignacio's course where there's very specific days, I have giant chunks of things that students do leading up to other things. And so I really give them complete flexibility of what they're doing when they do it, as long as they get to every 4 weeks, they sort of get to the point where they've done all the material they need to be prepared for the assessment. Man, and I really sort of want to start with the top because this is something that I think I've just been so interested to see how everybody who showed their page, what they do with that top section. Because I feel like of all the things that I change in Moodle over and over and again, that is the thing I continuously am never satisfied with. So I'm like, how do other people approach this? And I think once I do adopt roadmap, that'll probably take some of that out of it, and it can be a top thing that's important. But for right now, for this class, this last year, I broke it down into communication and problem session Zoom, textbook and data and lectures, resources, and then the main thing is what do you need all semester and what do you need at the very beginning? So that's how I tried to set it up for them, but that's sort of a little tangent just because I've been so inspired by how many great top Moodle sections I have. So, I also love that they brought back indentions so I can have slightly separate sections. But when a student starts the class after they make it through, and I totally am going to adopt somebody who had the activity completion for the starting things, so know that people have gone to the pages. I don't have that yet, but I'm going to put that in for next semester. But so much like the other folks who've talked, I have repeating chunks every. Man, I feel like I started in the total wrong space here. Let me take a step back. 140 students asynchronously are trying to learn GIS. And it's like a lab class. You want to work through these very detailed lab manual assignments, and you are going to answer questions as you go through them. And so as you go through them, you're answering these questions, and then at the end, you are going to create a map product, either a static map layout or a web mapping application. And so the students have these questions they're answering as they're going through the lab, and then they have this thing they're producing at the end. And one of it wasn't COVID that changed things for me because I was already teaching asynchronously, and I had been since I started 10 years ago. What changed for me was the Teaching and Learning Symposium in 2022 with Susan Blum, who came in and was like, ungrading, this is really a great way to change the focus from grades to mastery and not penalize student behavior and a lot of other great things that we could talk about at length. But for me, I had always struggled with this idea that it was a lab class, and so because students had to go through this lab, they were getting points for the lab portion of it, which was a large part of the class. They weren't able to work together on these things because it was tied to the points, and they weren't able to do the question over and over again because it was tied. This was just the idea, how I had thought the thing should be. And so when I heard of ungrading, I all of a sudden realized that it was an opportunity to completely change the learning portion of my class so that these labs could be more focused on mastery. So now the students, even though a lot of the elements are still the same as they were prior to switching to ungrading, every module that they work through, and I will also say, in this undergrad class, there's a textbook that I use. I was so shocked when I found a textbook that actually did exactly what I wanted to do. It balanced the how and the why. And so for my grad class, I don't have a textbook. I wrote all the material, I either inherited it and modified it or created it myself for the lab manuals that they go through. But this book does such a great job. So they go through this book, which is the lab manual essentially, and it balances the how and the why. They can go into this answer check right here. It's just a standard Moodle quiz, but they can take it over and over again, and they have to get a 75% to move on. Now, they can move on when they get a 75%, but I also stressed to them at the beginning that one of the things you're going to answer to at the end of the semester is you're going to present what grade you believe you deserve, and you are going to have to talk about whether or not you went back and tried to work on these questions that you got wrong. And I have the record of that, so I'll be able to go back and see whether or not you attempted the quiz multiple times or not. So they take this quiz, they hopefully they have to get a 75 in order for it to meet that completion, which then unlocks the next part of the module, which is a results communication forum. So unlike a forum where you're asking students to answer a question, this is just a place where I'm having them post their map product result. The thing, after they've made it through the lab manual, they will have a product. And they are supposed to share it. And the fact that they have to share it makes me hope that they put a little bit more effort into it because they know all their classmates are going to be seeing it. One of the things that I did this last year that I liked was I used Moodle Choice to allow students to select into their groups so that they are in much smaller groups so that they're not seeing 140 maps. They're only seeing the 35 maps of the students that are in their section. And I may even go smaller with that. In my grad class, in place of this functionality, I use perusal. And then the students are able to communicate with each other about their map products. I also ask them to do that in this forum, and I give them very clear guidelines of what is visual evidence to support X, Y, and Z. And so they have a page where they can go, and they're supposed to be then reflecting on other people's work and thinking about how things that they've done may be useful for them in their next map that they produce, because they're going to continue producing these style of products throughout the semester, learning different skills as they're developing it, but that end product that they're creating is going to be similar. So again, they're seeing how other people are approaching stylistic choices and focus choices, what they're choosing to present and not present. And then the final part of this is that, and this is something that I got directly from Lisa years ago, was the idea that I need to have a place for them to go and do a reflection. And since this is a very skills-based class, what I did was I developed a Google Sheet that they copy at the very beginning of the semester. And for each of these learning modules, they have very specific learning objectives that, or I would say more like skills. But I'm thinking when I do implement roadmap, I'm like, okay, I'll be able to tie specific skills to specific things. After I developed the skill part of it, I realized that there was also a missing part that I developed for my grad class that I came back and added to this one, which is the self-assessment of their map layouts. So there are a lot of standard elements that are expected in these layouts, and because those are repeating, I wanted to make them distinct from the rest of it. So all the purple is going to be the same for every module. But the things that they're going to do slightly differently, that are sort of requirements about what they need to be presenting, are all there at the top. And so then they answer the question, I'm confident I met this criterion, I partially met this criterion, or I'm not sure if I met it, and I didn't meet it. And on the same level, for this one, they were talking about, I'm confident I can demonstrate this, or describe or explain the skill, I still need some work on it. And then later on, periodically throughout the course, I asked them to revisit this page for the skills and see if they would move themselves from one category to the next. And specifically at the end, before they do a big reflection of the whole course, I asked them to go and work on some of these things. If they haven't gotten themselves, at least in the yellow, go back and contact me, talk to your friends, work on how can you get yourself to that next level. So once they've gone and done this, the accountability to make sure that they have, in fact, reviewed their product and reviewed the learning objectives for that particular module, then they go to an H5P question. And this H5P question just asks two things. It says, I have gone on and I filled out for the skills, and I've gone on and I filled it out for the map evaluation. And then for later modules, I also include, and I reviewed my feedback from the previous weeks, from the previous module, to see if colleagues have commented on my map or what conversation is happening. So they have to say, yes, I've done all these things. Do I know that they've done all these things? I do not. Do I really care? Nope. But I want them to have that check of like, yes, this is something that I'm at least going to say I've done. Maybe it'll inspire them to do that. So those are all in line, and within each of these, I use topics, but like, brain just went totally blank. The presenter before you, Ignacio, Elizabeth. Right, so she also uses the topics, but puts the weeks in them. So the way that I approach this is, since I wanted to offer flexibility and have rolling deadlines, but still offer a structure for accountability, I have target deadlines for all the modules that lead up to a particular assessment. So these modules have no deadlines, and when I look at the Moodle forum, I see things that came in really early and things that came in exactly before the assessment was due. We see all that. But because it's like these 3-week chunks students have, it gives them the back burner mentality of being an asynchronous class. They have to like have that accountability to come back to it in these moments. For the assessments, what I do is I have I use a very small but increasing late penalty. This looks really small, hold on. So I use, in the Moodle rubric, you can actually put negative numbers. So I use this to subtract, but again, I try to make them, over the years, I've made these smaller and smaller and smaller, and the cap used to be 50%. Now I give them, like, they can still get a 70 if they do it up until reading day. So this hopefully is enough of a motivation, but not a penalty that's so severe that prevents them from doing, because they do actually have to submit this assessment before they can unlock the next module. Now, sometimes a student will be really cheeky and they'll go in and they'll submit a blank page, and that way they'll get past it. But that's, again, what are you going to do with that? So let's see. What was on my fun list of things? All right, so that's how I sort of have the structure and flexibility. And I know that rolling deadlines can make a lot of things in Moodle really hard, and I feel like a lot of the things that I've tried, I've been told, no, don't do that because you want rolling deadlines. But I do feel like using the self-assessment combined with these sort of like check-in assessments that are hard deadlines has given me a good balance for that. Okay, let's see. And I guess maybe the last thing, because I'm just running ahead of schedule here, is, well, all right, 2 more things. One is I give students an option. The last chunk, the last assessment, I really want to make it so that they can either go back and revisit a previous assessment if they've done poorly on it, or they can choose to try something new. And I really want to encourage those who did well on the earlier assessments to try something new, but it's hard if they know they can just go and improve a few things and get a good grade. So I came up with this scheme of grade replacement. So basically, if they get below a 75% on either the first, not the first assessment because it's sort of lighter than the other 2, but the second 2 are sort of more conceptually showing me that they understand how to craft a question, do some spatial analysis, and produce a result. So for those, and they've detailed rubrics that the TAs do a great job giving lots of feedback on all the items. So they have to go through and item by item do a screen grab of the item where they didn't meet the top criteria, and then talk about how they addressed it. So for me, I think that like requiring those that have to go back, but allowing those who don't need to go back to try something new without the penalty of perhaps not doing as well on it and having chosen that option. So that's how I've structured my one like major choice type thing. And I've gotten a lot of good feedback in the course evals, but you never get good feedback in course evals. But sometimes you get a little nugget that's like, I really liked that I got to go back and revisit the assignment or try something new without worrying about how it would affect my grade. The next thing I was going to show was the portfolio. So the way that I capture, so in addition to the Google Sheet where they're like cataloging all their information, the last thing that they do is they fill out a Google form that has too many questions in it right now, because I'm also asking them about which things I need to find a better way to capture the data that they're giving me in the spreadsheet, but I basically just make them duplicate it in this form right now, which is unfortunate. I should show a different one. Let's see. We'd have to step through the... Anyhow, what they do is they answer 7 questions about the class and their effort on just... So the assessments are separate. Just the learning modules for the course represent like 50% of the grade. And they have to go in and talk about whether or not they went back and put in additional effort on their... all of the different components of the learning outcome. At first, I had this a little bit less structured, and I was getting just these responses that were just like, oh, my dog ate cake on Tuesday, and like nothing to do. So I was like, okay, I really need to like make this very clear that you need to answer these 7 questions and then present the grade. So that's what I have now, is that they, again, focused on the different components of those learning modules. Yeah. Gosh. I've gotten mixed feedback. I'm curious. People sometimes like the images at the top of the screen, but I've had a peer evaluation that was like, no, we don't like to have an image at the top of each one. It just takes up too much space on the page, things like that. I feel like there's a lot of personal choice when it comes to Moodle and how you set things up. Oh, I know what I was thought of. Somebody else in one of the tours earlier today mentioned that they give the students the option to choose an A+. And I did that the first semester that I did the ungrading. And I had 20 out of 100 say they deserved an A+. And I was like, maybe it was more than that. It was probably more than that. So I did take that away. And now they can, the highest grade they can suggest is an A. But I give the TAs the option to say, I tell them, I've got clear, detailed guidelines for them. If you feel this person's work really grew, they improved a huge amount over the course, or they've all consistently been producing high quality products, then send them an email telling them you're going to give them an A for the portfolio. And that's worked out really nicely. And it's also great to have that record. Looking back, I can go back and see what the TAs had specifically mentioned. So if somebody asked me for a letter of recommendation, I'd be like, oh, wow, you got an A+, and your TA wrote all these great things about you that I can just copy and use, because that's how it works. Yeah.
I have a question. What do you do with the student that submits a blank page? And to skip ahead. You just let them
They get the 0, and then yeah. It gets hairy at the semester. I always have like probably 10 students who by the end are nowhere near, like they just checked out. They are not even, maybe it's not 10, probably more like 8%. Like 8% includes the people that never started, that's never dropped the class, and that also are like just so far behind. But they know that we're going to accept the assessments up until reading day. So they then like try that last 2 weeks of the semester, they'll try to cram everything in. And it sucks for them, but I think, I want to give people enough rope that they can do things when they want to do them, but it is enough rope to handle themselves. I also, for those students, I really regularly go through the course activity. Somebody was talking about the activity completion report earlier. So I look at this, that's not the right one. Tiny arrow, activity completion. So like, I'm always looking at the activity completion report and looking at who is really far behind. And I would say probably 3 times a semester, I send out emails. Although now I need to know what this, is it YAM? What is this, yet another mail merge? Yeah, I need to look into this because I feel like this could be much more personalized than how I do it right now. But basically I'm like, you haven't started the class 3 weeks in. You are not on pace to be able to finish the class at 6 weeks in, things like that. But I always make it really encouraging because they can still make it through. And some of them do manage to get everything done at the end. Yeah, here's one. This person never did the first activity. Yeah. And like somebody else had mentioned earlier, like with those 4 choice activities, I just have a category in the Moodle gradebook that allows for it to take the top score. That's how that part works. Yeah. I don't feel like I've really done anything necessarily inventive with this, but I continuously try to improve it. And that's right? That's what counts. And I've really been inspired by a lot of things I've seen today.